There we go.
Awesome. Okay, welcome everybody to another New Normal session. We're very excited to continue bringing this series to everybody. Of course, for those of you who have joined us along this journey, we started off as a platform to be able to have open, honest, deep, and meaningful conversation with professionals in our network and in different industries, and get widely varied backgrounds, culturally, professionally, experience-wise, to come in and weigh in on the pandemic. To weigh in on how not just to get through this, but how to even thrive through the challenges and barriers that we've all been facing. We're certainly not the kind of people, Ryan and I and the people who are following along in these series. We're not the type of people to sit back and just wait for things to get back to normal. We're looking at areas where we can apply new techniques and try new things and make some forward progress through this difficult time. So we're continuing on with this series, and now that the pandemic has gone on as long as it has, we're placing a very strong emphasis on mental health and mental health awareness. We feel very strongly about the need to have open conversation about this. It's not doing anybody any good to pretend that everything's fine when it's not. We care about the people in our community. We want to make sure that there are people who are able to speak to specific mental health issues, challenges, barriers, techniques they use to feel better and again thrive and survive through this. It's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Moran from the incredible team at CoMotion. I can never say enough about them. Not only are they a wonderful institution in the Hamilton business community, but just collectively as a group of people, with 100% certainty, I know with 100% certainty that they have the mental well-being, physical well-being, business well-being of the members of their community and the business community as a whole at the top of their list, and they live and breathe that every day, and I appreciate you guys. So Ryan, thank you for coming on this journey with the New Normal sessions with me. I appreciate you, appreciate your team, and look forward to keeping this rocking and rolling.
Well, thank you very much, Brad. And all the same right back at you and the Jet Propelled team and the amazing support and work that you guys do. So it's my pleasure today to welcome my good old friend, Katee Hui. So Katee is a strategist with Pentagram and founder of Hackney Laces. Katee is a senior strategist at Pentagram with 13 years experience, specializing in brand strategy and social impact. She's worked client-side and corporate social responsibility at Sainsbury's and at agencies including Nice and Serious and FutureGov. Katee is the founder of Hackney Laces, a community club for girls and women in East London that teaches soccer and life skills. For her work with Laces, she's been recognized as Point of Light by the UK Prime Minister and was awarded BBC Sports Personality of the Year for London in 2018, and was named one of the UK's top 100 changemakers in 2019 by The Big Issue. Katee is also a fellow at the Royal Society of the Arts, a mentor at Bethnal Green Ventures, and a global trustee at Parkrun. Always one of the most impressive people I've ever known. So Katee, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me and calling me old.
You got to figure out how to position that better next time, Ryan.
Good aged friend, yeah.
Long time friend. We'll go with long time
that
friend.
Works. Yeah, all right, there we go.
Man, you're batting 1,000 on that one, right?
Yeah, it's Friday. It's Friday, so here we go. Yeah, Brett, do you want to maybe kick us off? Lob us a question. Yeah.
Katee, thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you. I think that it's going to be really substantial and valuable for the people who listen to this to get your unique perspective on things that have happened during the pandemic, of course, things that have happened in your career and how you've overcome challenges and barriers and kept yourself balanced and sane. I mean, when you look at your resume, a lot of like Pentagram, top of the food chain, there's going to be a lot of expectations, a lot of stress, and that requires certainly a lot of finesse and expertise in being able to bring balance and bring mental health into your life as well. One thing I'm gonna kick us off with this. I'm just gonna come right out with it because you've said you've talked about things and people and ideas living in your head rent free. And we were saying just before we started this, I'd really like to dive into that because I think there are a number of ways that can be interpreted, and there are a number of ways that can be applied to benefit somebody. So I would love to hear you extrapolate on that and dig a little bit deeper.
Sure. So I guess it's helpful to start with I am guilty of sometimes overthinking things.
Yes.
And I'm also quite guilty of playing something over in my mind and wanting a different outcome than the one that was reality. Yeah. And very often, especially in situations where like you feel like there's been an injustice, or you feel like you've not been able to stand up for yourself, or you feel like you just would have done something differently had you known, had you read it better, had you had better judgment, at the whole number of circumstances. And in my head, those moments I call are like, when you're doing that, those are the like living rent-free moments, because you're allowing someone to take up your time and space and mental energy because of something that it wasn't on you, but the way that it made you feel makes it feel like it's on you.
Without giving anything of value in return.
Yeah.
Yeah. Living rent-free.
Yeah, exactly. There's no reciprocal exchange. There's, if anything, it feels like you've let them take too much from you because it's bothered you that much. And I think that's part of also learning to let go and recognize that sometimes these things happen, but you can't let it fester and you can't let it dwell, because in doing so, the only person it's affecting is you. They've moved on, or whatever that situation was, has probably even thought about it. Whereas for you, it kind of becomes this all-consuming thing. And actually, I think during the pandemic, I see this a lot, not just within myself, but with other people. You don't get the same social cues or the same moments to have those communicate in a way that's not just through a screen.
Right.
And so somebody could email something, or somebody could text something, and the way you look at that, you're like, oh, what? Oh no, that's not what I meant. And it becomes this big thing that you think about. And then you're like, it's a non-issue. Yeah. So that's my summary of living rent-free.
So what are your, again, digging a little bit deeper into practical application of that, what are your cues to remind yourself, and then what is your process or strategy for sidestepping that and making sure that it doesn't impact you in a negative way?
I think some of my cues and some of my like coping mechanisms have been being more confident and recognizing that like I'm allowed to ask questions, and I'm allowed to go back on this, and I don't have to be feeling like I'm in a position to just like go on the journey. So an example that I had was the social enterprise that I run. We had somebody who said they were an accountant. I trusted that they were an accountant. And as we went through, there were so many moments and signals. There's signals that people give you where it doesn't feel right. As soon as you get that signal, start asking questions and start doing things. Don't continue going to see where it ends up, because I can assure you that's when they live in your head rent free. The minute you can be direct, and the minute you can feel confrontational, even if it's uncharacteristic for you, is the minute you're taking a step in the direction of, I'm in control of the situation and I'm not letting you take me down this path.
Right.
Love that. I actually have is something that I've held true for a very long time that's in alignment with that. And I've said to people so many times, being honest is one of the most selfish things that you can do, because you take this burden that you hold when you have to lie or be dishonest about something. You have to remember the lie, you have to craft the lie, you have to feel guilty about it, you have to possibly, all these things. You go, you know what? No, I don't have time for any of this crap. Here's the truth. if it doesn't work for you, I'm sorry, but I've got stuff to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, love
and
that.
it's prioritizing yourself.
Yeah.
Even if there's going to be awkwardness.
Yeah.
So in terms of living rent-free, I mean, the year that we've all been living through, I think has put a number of tenets in our heads. One thing I want to touch on first is, I mean, you began to go into Hackney Laces, and I'm sure you talked about this a lot. I listened to the recent podcast you're on where you talked about Hackney Laces, but it's a really cool thing. So I wonder if maybe you could, first of all, introduce Hackney Laces to us and the background of it. Then also talk about, with that, what we've been talking about with mental health and kind of being shut down and shut in this year. Obviously, the things have been kind of unique and different in the UK at various points throughout the year. How has that impacted Hackney Laces? So where did it come from, and how has this year kind of impacted that, and then resulting in impacting kind of you personally?
So first of all, I think saying the situation in the UK is unique. I feel like the disclaimer is the situation in the UK is bad. Like it's bad. For whatever reasons, it's not been managed very well. And I think so that in turn has an impact. But I'll start with, so Laces, I set up Laces when I moved here, and like full disclaimer, I grew up in Hamilton, as Ryan said, had an amazing childhood running around playing Timbit soccer, co-ed everywhere. It was just so accessible, so lovely, and was like a foundation for how I socialized, how I made friends, how I have got confidence and improved my self-esteem. It was like a surrogate family to me. Now, fast forward to, I've always played soccer. I moved to the UK. Women's soccer just wasn't a thing here. Girls didn't play in school. It just blew my mind. So I effectively imported my childhood soccer experience. And shockingly, it's seen as really innovative here, which is kind of funny, kind of sad. But,
well, that was actually just, I think, I had mentioned it to you, sorry to interrupt, but that was one thing I found unique, interesting in itself too, in that podcast I was listening to where you're talking. It never occurred to me of just, the Canadian soccer Saturday kind of model was as kind of unique as it was there.
Yeah. Canada's, we're quite lucky. Here, there's loads of barriers and huge legacy system reasons why it's so unequal between the men and women's game. But I decided to set up a community club for girls that lived in my area because I kept being asked if there was a place for them to play. So we do football, on the pitch stuff, but we also do off the pitch stuff, which is life skills and training and qualifications. And we operate in 3 London boroughs and work with hundreds of women and girls. And part of, I guess, when lockdown hit, we hit that like moment of, oh, this is fine, we'll just move everything online. Mm-hmm. And then you go, oh shit, some of our members come from backgrounds where they don't have internet in their homes. Sure. And when we're saying, oh, let's do sessions online together, it's like, well, why would they have footballs? They come to training to play with footballs. No one has a football in their house. Like there was all of these things that we started to process. And then we were like, how can we stay connected apart? Especially when young people, like when people talk about loneliness, they think elderly people who are on their own, people who are single, people who don't have people around them. But one of the biggest demographics of people that are lonely are young people, despite the fact that they're so connected digitally to each other. But it's that age group of 16 to 24 is one of the highest for loneliness in the UK. So we're acutely aware that a lot of our members will experience feelings of loneliness, and loneliness is one of the things that leads into it's like the tipping point. It's one of the things that drives other forms of mental health issues. So we've been trying really hard to stay connected. The first lockdown, so we've had 3 lockdowns, but the first lockdown was like teething issues, finding our feet, working out how we could support each other. And I would say I found that the hardest emotionally, because that was people suffering the most. People that have lost their jobs, who in normal circumstances could feed their families, and all of a sudden the football club is buying food boxes for them each week. And we went into kind of survival mode, and we were really lucky that some of our funders are so progressive that they were like, don't spend anything on programmatic stuff, bare necessities. So we in effect turned into a public service where we were like, what do you need and what's going to be helpful to you? Do you need food, or do you need transportation money, or like, what is it that you need that we can help you with? So that was first lockdown, which I think across the globe was survival mode. And then we had this lovely break in the summer where we all got to see each other. And even though we were meant to social distance, we tried. Telling teenage girls not to hug and run around and roll around on the ground together was very tough. But it was so nice to have everyone come back together and see everyone face to face, and also understand the effects of what lockdown had on them. So we do a lot of measuring, monitoring and evaluation. And when we ask them, what are you most worried about? The thing they're most worried about is a sense of loss. And I know we all talk about grief and how everyone's grieving things that didn't happen, or things that, just sadness of people that you may have lost or have been unwell. They are grieving things like, I'm afraid I won't be as good as I was before lockdown. I'm afraid I'll be less social. I'm afraid I won't be as smart. I'm afraid I'm going to fall behind in school. Like, these are very specific losses that I think, when I, as a 36-year-old woman, when I think about my losses, it's more like, oh, I'm not as fast at running as I used to be because I'm not training as much, or that planned move to Canada is probably not going to happen. Like, but it's such a different, my sense of loss is very different to theirs. It's shared in the sense that we're all grieving, but theirs is very specific to becoming worse at stuff and doing stuff.
Right.
And then there's a tie-in to, like you were saying earlier, tie-in to confidence, right? This is a really interesting conversation. So I think that you touched on something really important here, talking about how, you set out in one direction with the organization to do a specific thing, and then the pandemic hits, and all of a sudden you can't do that thing anymore. And I think it's really incredible what you did naturally, which is reassess what your actual value to that audience and that community was, and then said, okay, we're not made up of the facility that we have. We're not made up of the field and the equipment, and that's not where our value lies. Our value lies in bringing people together, giving kids skills, bringing up their confidence, and all these different things. And I think it's really, it's something that not a lot of people are capable of doing, and you just did naturally.
I've never thought about it like that until you literally just said that.
Yeah.
But instinctually, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Not say, sorry guys, no sessions until December.
That speaks to your character, and it's impressive. I mean, I've had there's a sports academy in Hamilton that I've worked with, and they had to shut their doors. And one of the first conversations that I said with them, or had with them, was to say, like, you guys aren't the walls and the ceiling and the lights and the mats. You guys are you guys have to dig deep and realize that the value that you're bringing to these kids and these adults that you're working with is so much greater and so much deeper than that. And you just need to reconfigure what your belief is around how you deliver that value. So I think that's wonderful.
We've done, in doing so, we've learned so much about ourselves as an organization, as a leadership team, our coaches, our volunteers. And I think it's put us in an amazing, we're in our third lockdown now. This one, we've not been given an end date. So you can imagine, you're just floating. We don't know what's happening. But what we decided was the best way to look after the most amount of our club was to go decentralized. So we've got 7 coaches, and each coach is given 5 to 7 girls. And it's like, that's your cluster. You look after each other. But every day they check in and do stuff. But then every week there's a weekly challenge that we all compete against each other. So we're running a football league, but we're doing it totally remotely. And the challenges that we have are things like design our 10th anniversary scarf. Last week it was who could do the most amount of burpees in 1 minute. But the prizes are like pizza delivery to your house. Nike gave us sports bras for a winning team. Like, they're really great prizes. It's super random, but it still feels like we're in competition, and it still feels like like every week I'm like, oh, who am I going to beat this week? Even though my team's in last place, but it still maintains that sense of familiarity. It still gives people something to look forward to. And it also brings other people in who are doing nothing. So we've been really bold in asking like some of our partners like Nike or like a takeaway service, like, hey, can you provide 7 Chinese takeaways on Chinese New Year's for the winning team of the Laces Lockdown League?
That's really
But
cool.
it works so well because no one's doing anything, and it brings so much joy to the teams and the girls that are winning and going through this. So that's it's kind of been like an arc, but we've improved and learned as we've got into this. And I think that consistency and that connection to the girls now, for me, is what's helping me cope through this version of lockdown.
Yeah.
I'm still not coping 100%, but you know.
So that is a common reoccurring theme that we have coming up during these sessions that I'd love to segue into. You know, you talk about you know, these things that you're doing for this club and the community and the kids and how they're benefiting, and they're, you know, you've pivoted and you've realized that the value isn't in physically kicking a soccer ball around. The value is in building somebody's confidence, giving them something to look forward to, giving them, you know, combating loneliness and all these things. But then for you, and this is something that, you know, we talk about regularly, this is helping you stay healthy and you stay in good spirits because you're bringing your own value to somebody, and that makes you feel wonderful, you know. And we talk about this all the time. If you do not feel great, if you're struggling with mental health and wellness and well-being, find a way to help somebody. Find a way that you can deliver value to somebody, and you are gonna have an instant boost of gratitude and just feeling better about what you're bringing to the world. You know, I'd love to hear more on what that's done for you personally, as a benefit that maybe you didn't even realize you were going to get out of it, but then all of a sudden, you know, you realize that you're maybe happier and feeling better and in better spirits.
I think innately as humans, we want to feel needed, or at least useful, and have a purpose. And I do feel that with Laces, and I do feel like even when I look at the coaches who've been like spearheading so much of this, I think even for them, they're furloughed at the moment. That's like, yeah, you know what that means. Yeah. So because they're on furlough, they have loads of time, but they're not really doing anything. And I know a lot of people, they're like, great, my livelihood's safe, but like, how am I filling the days? And like everyone being given responsibility and being given things, I think has helped. Personally, having that sense of purpose, I think, has kept me going in a lot of times where I'm like, especially January, it's cold and it's pitch black, and you're like, should I leave the house today? Probably just gonna stay on the sofa. Like, let's be honest. But yeah, being a part of it is that thing that provides that like huge mental health benefit. Not an analogy, but a similar example I can give to you is the organization Parkrun, where I'm on the global board for it. Parkrun operates in Canada, guys. If you ever want to do the Hamilton waterfront one, it's amazing. But it's a free weekly 5K run, but it's put on entirely by volunteers. And you have a start line and a finish line, and everyone comes together and has coffee after. And it's global. It's in a lot of different countries. And it's the same phenomenon every Saturday morning at 8 or 9 a.m., depending on where you're based.
And where can we find them?
As in Hamilton?
Like website or?
It will be parkrun.ca.
Okay, perfect.
But the beauty of Parkrun is you can run, you can walk, you can volunteer. And so much of what we've learned about the parkrun community is that volunteering gives people just as much as running. There will be people that don't want to run, that just want to volunteer. And there's a social health benefit, a physical health benefit, and a mental health benefit by turning up to this community, you know? And there's something I think that when we talk about volunteering or giving your time, people see it as this like altruistic act, or like I'm doing this thing because I want to make the world better. when it's actually pretty selfish. Like the amount that I get out of doing these things, you get so much out of what you're putting in.
The intent is altruistic, but there is that almost immediate benefit. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if, I mean, pivot's kind of been the word of the year, or one of the many words of the year. You kind of talked about how some of also the corporate sponsors, you saw that sort of shift with them too, in terms of actually being more focused on wellness. Was there a challenge there at all, or were they right into it right from the start, or how did you pivot in terms of that, what you were changing and evolving in the Hackney Laces front in terms of different services you're providing, and still keeping those corporations both interested and actually engaged from that sort of health and well-being standpoint?
I think there's two, like, to be completely honest, there's two sides of that. There's the corporates that sponsor us that had no ability or infrastructure to give money to anyone else.
Right.
So by default, they were like, hey, do you guys want some more money? Because to go through a procurement process or to go and find organizations that need that money would it'd be too cumbersome for them to do. Mm-hmm. So we're quite fortunate in that respect that one of our funders was like, we're not going to do an open call. We're just going to give you some more cash. Feel free to use it however you want. And then Nike, who we work with, were just great. They were like, what can we do to help you? How can we continue to support you? And do you want to, they did a lot of different lockdown challenges with athletes. And they said, is that helpful to you guys? Do you want to take part? I think when you're working with brands and corporates that are progressive and really buy into what you do, they trust you when you pivot to say, we've done our due diligence. We know you're responsibly managed. And if you think this is the thing you need to do, go for it. But I would say that we're in such a fortunate position. I would say a lot of other organizations, lots of social enterprises, like, will cease to exist because they lose their staff, because they lose their income, because they have no opportunities for fundraising. And that's something that I've also seen. Or I've seen corporates that sponsor other organizations that have just decided to pull their sponsorship because things aren't happening.
Right.
And that, obviously we're super fortunate that didn't happen to us, but when you see it happening to other people, you kind of go, they're trying to protect their profit or trying to protect whatever value they think they're bringing to an organization until we're back together face to face.
Right. Okay. I guess maybe one thing I want to talk about too, and this is kind of shifting gears from sort of the immediate tactical to do with whether it's Hackney Laces or the corporate sponsorship, but also, I guess, I mean, it is kind of tied to the pivoting. But one thing that's always, I think, impressed me about you, and I think I've communicated it to you a number of times across the many decades that we've known each other, is the idea of you're always able to, I've always felt that you're able to just do things. Like there's almost a barrier there that doesn't exist for you that I think does for maybe a lot of people, but I'm sure that's me romanticizing it. And that from a personal perspective, you do feel and see a barrier. So one of the things we often talk about with some guests too is that, how do you go about doing those things that you do on a daily basis that other people find very impressive? So if you could talk a bit about that too, in terms of whether it was founding Hackney Laces a little over a decade ago, or whether it was, pivoting in the face of the pandemic and how you change those things, whether it's going back to Pentagram, whether it's all these different things that you do. What sort of barrier do you feel, and what do you do and practice internally that kind of drives you?
Well, I look at you, Ryan, and you, Brad, and I'm like, you guys are so impressive. You do so much. Like, I feel like this is how people appear to other people isn't necessarily reality. I would say, in terms of like the not having perceived barriers or just going on and doing things, one of the biggest things I've realized is, like, as soon as you stop caring what other people think and and letting that go, I feel is one of the things that helps make that easier. Like microaggressions. I've experienced microaggressions my entire life. And these microaggressions can be anything from the fact that I'm mixed race, or they could be for the fact that I'm a woman in football, or they could be like people going, oh, you don't stick around long, whether that's about a boyfriend I had or whether that's by like my resume. Like
Sure.
People make these judgments and they say these microaggressions. And every time that happens to me, instead of internalizing that as, oh, should I stay in this job longer? Or should I have like stuck it out in that relationship that was awful because somebody else thinks that it was short? Or the minute like you push those away, it's super empowering because you're like, I don't really care what you think. And my measure of success is what my old friends like Ryan think, and what my husband thinks, and my family and my sibling. Like, it's the people that are around me that make me feel like who I am. Like that's the support and trust network. I also was raised by an incredibly strong mother who always told me there was nothing I couldn't do. And it's really funny because even to this day, like I was like 10 years old. I was like, I'm gonna be a firefighter. My mom's like, yeah, you could. You're pretty small, but you could. And like, she would never let me lose that dream despite knowing that even if I tried, it just wouldn't happen. And recently I was telling her about how I wanted to, I've been thinking about being a voluntary search and rescue diver. I saw a plane crash and I was just like, God, it's so awful that like they're searching and searching for people. And I was like, imagine you could go and help in that effort. And my mom said to me, Katee, you know that it's not like rescue, it's like retrieval. And I was like, oh yeah, it's bodies. Yeah, it's bodies, not like finding live people. And she was like, well, you know, if that's what you're interested in, but she would never say like you don't have the character to do that or the mental strength, which I definitely don't. Like I couldn't be around dead bodies. But it's that, I think that encouragement as well that has really helped me not see things as having barriers. I've kind of explored them and then worked out for myself that it's probably not suited to my skill set or my temperament.
It sounds would it be fair to say that you know, throughout your life experience and your career, you haven't felt the need to get permission from somebody to follow through on an idea that you had?
That is correct. And it's also because
that's beautiful.
But I have been the flip side of that is my entire career I have been underestimated. Through everything. And I find that quite like motivating now. I think before it felt, I was just like, oh, I just have something to prove and I'm just going to continue. But for even now, when like I look young. So when you go for like a job that you think you deserve, you have the skills and experience and people are questioning your ability and you're like, okay, if this is culturally not the right fit for me, if you don't think I'm the right person for this.
Perfect. That's the exact right response for that. I think that there are, you know, a massive barrier for people going back to what you were saying earlier is confidence, right? Confidence is going to stop a lot of people from doing things that are going to benefit themselves, benefit the community. And I think that, you know, put out a notice to anybody listening right now. You don't need permission to do something cool. You don't.
I'm tweeting that, right?
You don't need permission. You know, it's funny. I lived and worked in Toronto for like the better part of 10 years. And it was such a saturated place. And I imagine London is quite saturated as well. And then moved to Hamilton. And there was this sort of freeing thing for me where, you know, I would have all these ideas constantly and I'd want to do all this stuff. And in Toronto, in a very saturated big city, it was, you know, if you have the idea, chances are there are 50 people who are already 6 months into it, you know? And then moving to Hamilton, there's this weight lifted off. And if you have an idea, it's your responsibility to see it through. It's not that you're doing it for you anymore. You came up with the idea, something struck, you know, in you, and now it's your responsibility to see that through to fruition. And I think looking back on it now, I think that if I were in Toronto and in a saturated market and taking, you know, inspiration from you in a saturated market in London to say, I don't care if somebody's already 6 months into it or any of that kind of thing. Taking the perspective of it being your responsibility to move forward with something versus, should I do it? Am I good enough? I don't know if I can, or like being self-conscious and lacking confidence. Spinning that around and saying, nope, I've got the idea. I got time to rally people and figure this out and get it done.
Yeah. You know what? One thing that I find really cool about that too, and also kind of cool from what you were saying your mom would do too, in terms of like, you're a bit short, but you can still do that. Like, is the idea of it's not shutting down, it's constructive. Here's an obstacle you might encounter. It's not to say that it's not going to happen. It's to say this is something you need to be mindful of or be aware of. And it really kind of comes back to, there's a great quote I love about children's lit, and how, like, right now, this is getting very far away, it seems, but it's going to come back, I promise. It's the idea that, like, right now, there's a lot of really fluffy children's fiction, like whether it's Disney productions or movies or things like that, compared to, say, the more kind of weird, creepy Victorian children's fiction of like Alice in Wonderland. And there's this great quote by a writer, G.K. Chesterton, who said that children don't need to know or don't need to be told that dragons don't exist. They need to be told that they can be beaten. So it's the idea of, like, no, do the scary thing, be intimidated, but have the constructive root of understanding how things can be overcome. And I think maybe kind of bringing it full circle back, I also feel like something that you're doing a bit with Hackney Laces as well too. And that's something that's kind of embedded in the DNA of the organization. So I don't know, does that resonate with you at all in terms of that sort of thinking? Or
definitely. I think too, we often assume, to what Brad was saying earlier, if it's like a saturated market, if there's so many things happening in it, it means there's no place for you. Mm-hmm. But we're taught that we have to be the best and we have to own that market. And success is only being the one that's already doing it or was first to it. The number of companies that have been copycat that are absolutely fine and thriving because they know their audience, they know their clientele, they know the thing that they want to do. And people always ask me about Laces, where like another women's club will pop up and like, oh, did you see them? And I'm like, mate, we're not in competition. Like, if anything, I'm like, come more.
Yes.
Because I might have been the first, but I definitely don't want to be the last. And
right.
That, like, the more you see it as not being in competition, or even like to your analogy, Ryan, about like dragons do exist, you just need to know that they can be beaten. Mm-hmm. That applies to how everyone, I think, approaches their careers or their lives. The way that if your own marker of success is your own value system and your own guidance, then you'll be just fine. But if your own mark of success is what influences around you are telling you, and it's not necessarily helpful, then you'll get stuck. And that brings us back to living in your head rent free.
And you will always be dependent on something you don't have control over.
Completely.
Right? Yeah. And this actually ties in really well to something that you said to Ryan earlier about, the perception of other people's success is often not true, right? And, talking about, that person is at the top of their game, or, this is scary for me, but it's not scary for them. And that's why it's easy. And that's why they made a success for this. Everybody's scared shitless, Everybody's taken a leap. That's trying something out for the first time. They're scared out of their mind. None of us are above or beyond that. Everybody, it's just, I place this incredible value on people who have been able to, hit a 5 out of 10 that started at a 1, versus somebody who hit a 7 out of 10 who started at a 5. It's like, if you weren't shaking in that interview, and you got the job, well, yeah, you weren't as nervous. You didn't have that deficit to make up as much as somebody else, right? So it's I think in a lot of ways we need to champion and celebrate people being scared and doing it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe going back to kind of some of the people that the doubters that you've encountered, or the dragons, so to speak. What has been your strategy in terms of beating them? which maybe sounds more violent than it intends, but it's that idea of overcoming those challenges. Obviously, we've talked about how, the feeling of needing permission and bypassing that. But in terms of someone who, looks at you and like, well, she's young and she's short, never mind. Like, how do you overcome that? What's your approach?
I think I have to try to filter out whose opinions I really care about and whose I don't. And to give you a recent example of this, so early in my career, I worked at Pentagram. I was there for 3.5 years and I loved the experience. A lot of people questioned my return. So I returned, it's about a year ago, I think next week. And people were like, isn't that going a step backwards? Like, why would you go back? And like, but some of them are good friends and some of them are just people that were like, oh, that's weird. Like, aren't you going to climb the ladder and you're going to become head of next? And like, that was the best decision I've made in 2020. I went back to a place where I felt my most creative, where I did some of my best work, where I had a partner I work for that completely respects me and is a great friend within an amazing team. And even still now, I'm like a year in, people are like, oh, what's it like being back though? Is it like going back like to younger in your career? Is it back? But again, like, I think for some people it's like when you go back to high school after you left high school, like, would you do that? Do you feel comfortable doing that? Because you're a different version of yourself. But I think that the situation of like overcoming that like external judgment on the decisions that you make, or the people that are doubting the decisions that you make, it's your life. Like, it's your happiness. I could have spent an entire year as a head of strategy at a large international networked agency, or I could go back to a place that I'm super happy making great work with a boss that I love. Hands down, the decision's easy. But to everyone else, it doesn't look like that. And it might seem like I took a step down, or it might seem like I'm not progressing. But for me, it's the only progress I need.
Right.
I want to take a second here to recognize how hilarious it is for me that there's anybody in your life that looks at being a senior strategist at Pentagram as a slide backwards. We live in different worlds. We live in different worlds, Katee. I don't know what to say about that. But
it's true.
That's incredible. I mean, it's incredible. But anyway, that's one thing that we've talked about quite a bit as well. And I actually spent in the Hamilton business community, I spent a lot of time talking to business owners and upper level executives at architecture firms, DPAI and McCallum Sather, and through Parallel, which, Ryan has a history with them. And I would always talk to them about when they sort of recognized their point of diminishing returns, right? And I think that's what you recognized. You said, I can continue on this path that I've been driving this car on this road forever, but I missed my stop. I don't want to miss my stop where I'm finding happiness and balance and the coworkers that I love and the work that I love. So many people miss out on that. I would, again, I think that there are a lot of these things that are just sort of innately within you. But if you can dissect it and pull it apart a little bit, I think it would be helpful for people to understand what are the flags, what are the triggers to recognize when you might be overstepping that point of diminishing returns.
I think as soon as you stop enjoying what you're doing, when you have the ability to make change. And I say that because it's a really privileged position to be in, to be able to not like the client base you have, or not like the type of work you're doing, or, but within that, the minute you hit that point where you're like, this isn't actually the type of work I want to do, you kind of have that check of, is it because I am not good enough? Is it because I've kind of made it into the wrong industry or the wrong type of the segment of the industry? And then going, what is it that's going to give me that balance? An example, I was in a role that I wasn't enjoying and I was struggling a lot. And I thought the best thing to do would be go down to 4 days a week. If I went down to 4 days a week, that gave me a bit more balance, a bit more time, because I just felt incredibly burnt out and I couldn't find work fulfilling. And then I loved my 4 day week. And then I realized it's not that I need more time to myself. It's that I need to not be in this place. But I carried on that 4-day week. I still do a 4-day week right now. And yeah, you too.
Oh, heck yeah.
But it's become such an important thing, both for balance and keeping that perspective, and also to know what that state of diminishing returns is. Because if I can't, I call it, maybe this might be the same as what you're talking about. I call it like the highest level of incompetence.
Oh, yes, that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So like when you hit the point where you're like, I can't do this job, or I don't want to do this job, or whatever that is. But I think also having that day grounds me in, if there's things I don't know, I can find them out. And if I feel really out of my depth, I'm like, this isn't the right thing for me. And actually the type of balance, the type of thing I need in my life looks like this. And it will be so different to each individual, because I think some people really thrive on that idea that we are on a ladder and there's a trajectory and you climb it. Yeah. And that's your marker of success. And there's no shame in that. But then for other people, that portfolio career, or that 4-day work week, or that part-time or permalance, or whatever roles and shapes that people want to do it, I think it has to be deeply personal, and it can't be dictated by what other people think they should do.
Or what you have been brought up in the system to think you're supposed to want.
Exactly. Like I try all the time to tell my parents what I do. It's hard. Because the job that I do didn't exist when they were working.
Right.
So why did you study environmental science, but you work in brand? It's like, because that's the way the world is.
Right. Yeah.
And I think a lot of what you just said, again, we have this constant theme of it boils down to confidence. Have confidence in yourself. You don't need permission from other people to say, this is the type of life I want to live.
Mm-hmm. I think too, that aspect of confidence, of when you start feeling that detractor to your confidence, and you don't feel that as much anymore, because there's a difference between confidence and not knowing the answer to something, but knowing that you can figure it out and you'll have that time, and also potentially that appreciation or gratitude down the road, versus not having the confidence about whether or not you do this. It doesn't really seem like it's going to matter, or feel like it's going to matter kind of professionally. It's a big red flag, I suppose, in terms of identifying it.
There's that famous story about John Lennon as a young student, and the teacher saying to the class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And his answer was happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the assignment. And he said, no, I don't think you understand.
Right.
And I think that's something that we can all live by, right? Like I was in a corporate position, 6-figure income. I was stressed to death. The job was killing me. I recently wrote an article about it. I was commuting up to 2.5 hours in the winter to get back and forth for this job. And when you strip all of that away and you're like, I don't need to make money. I need time with my family. I need a creative outlet for me, and I can strip away all this stuff. All I'm doing is I'm making extra money to pay for the healthcare that I'm going to need later from, diabetes and stress and alcoholism and whatever else. I mean, you pay a toll eventually. You might as well live the life that you want to live and be happy now.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I think, so just to highlight, maybe about 5 minutes or so left. So I want to take a really kind of big constructive question, I suppose. You kind of mentioned the idea that, like, going back to Pentagram was one of the best decisions of the past year. So let's take that concept of the past year and the different challenges and kind of journeys that we've all respectively been on. One person a couple months ago said to me the idea of 2020 being like, it really did represent its namesake, that, whether it was good or bad, it provided a certain amount of focus. So in terms of looking back at maybe the past year and things like recognizing that, Pentagram decision was a good one, different pivots or changes you've had to make with Hackney Laces, challenges in terms of, I know you were talking about coming back to Canada at one point.
We're coming, don't you worry.
We can't wait. What is that focus that you feel 2020 brought to you?
Okay, so it gave me a couple of things. The first was the recognition that the rat race isn't for me.
Mm.
And I say that because like I've met my neighbors for the first time, which is embarrassing because I live in like a block like of flats. I never saw them because I was either coming home or leaving before other people. That focus was alarming. The other one was on relationships and friendships. So you know this, Ryan, because I call you all the time. But like the people that really matter, I know it's not a zombie apocalypse, but if it were a zombie apocalypse, like who are the 10 people you're going to call? And I think that also this year made me recognize of how important friendships and relationships are, including like the Sunday Zoom that I have with my parent or my mom and stepdad and Callum's parents and my sister and Callum's aunt and uncle. That element of it. But I think there was a part of the past year that really helped me grow personally. And that was normalizing that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I've ever given myself that space of permission in my whole life. And actually, I think we're conditioned to think that happiness is an end goal or like it's a permanent state. And this past year has really helped me focus on the fact that you're going to go through ebbs and flows. There's going to be like shitty, heartbreaking moments, but there's also going to be really nice, like small moments that remind you that like we are human. And that's been like a really nice thing, is to actually pay attention to my own well-being and mental health because I have the time and the space to. And also routine. So I was meant to run the Belfast Marathon when lockdown happened. I was ready. Like, guys, I was so ready for that. And actually what's been so nice now is one of the only things you can really do under the UK lockdown is exercise once a day. So I've been keeping myself in a regimented running routine, which has had like amazing benefits to my physical and mental health. But the focus of I will still have goals and I still achieve them. I just have a much longer training plan.
I love your point of letting yourself know that it's okay not to be okay. There's a famous quote from Canadian comedian Jim Carrey, where he says, I wish everybody could be rich and famous so that they could realize it doesn't make you happy. And I think you can apply that to being successful. I wish everybody could be successful so that they can realize that we all struggle. We're all struggling with mental health. We're all struggling everything's on a spectrum to one degree or another. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's not just an easy path for anybody.
And also success in this pandemic is getting out of bed. It's remembering to brush your teeth twice a day. Genuinely, success in this pandemic are these things, and we can't downplay it as, oh, that's just like normal. Like the struggle is real.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with the toothbrushing thing. That's been something that I always made sure to, but it was sometimes like noon that you do it. And then it was, I mean, you both know Abby. Abby's very good at her routine. So like, I was like, as soon as she gets up, she brushes right away. I'm like, that's a good thing to do. I'm going to start copying you, Abby. Yeah. So
we actually made a checklist at the start of first lockdown of like, walk the dog, brush our teeth, exercise, call home. And it literally was like a checklist of just like reminding ourselves that like, this is achieving something. We've achieved something because we've done these things.
Well, that's fantastic. So we're just nearing time. Katee, I don't know if you have any final thoughts you want to share or anything before we begin to phase out.
It's been so nice to meet you, Brad, and to chat to you both. And I love that geographies apart, we're all on the same wavelength. So thank you so much. It's been a really lovely experience.
No, thank you very much for coming on. Yeah. Great talking to you.
Really quickly, my takeaways from this conversation have been great, and I really appreciate it. I love the points that you brought up about having confidence in yourself, about surrounding yourself with people that are going to foster that confidence, not waiting for permission to be able to do something, and being serving your community, serving the people around you, and how that comes back to you. I think these are all wonderful, important points that are valuable, that are great techniques and to be able to combat different mental health challenges that people are going through right now and beyond. You know, people struggle with these things outside of the pandemic. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. This is a really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're excited to continue this speaker series. We're getting a great response so far, and we hope that this is helpful. And we're gonna keep driving this truck till the wheels fall off, and we'll catch you all next time.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.